Okay, everyone, thank you for being here. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming. My name's Andy Renfro, and I'm the Truckee Police Chief. I'd like to first introduce our mayor, Lindsay Romack, to have some opening words before we get started.
Thank you very much, Chief Renfro. I just want to start out. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Romack. I'm mayor of Truckee. Did also want to thank my two fellow council members Zabriskie and Klovstad, in attendance this evening. And thank everybody in this room. All of you, our community members that are here, for dedicating some time this evening away from the 49ers game, as well as thanking everybody here at the podium, at the dais, over there. This just shows you all the great minds that have been working behind the scenes to prepare our community in case there is a wildfire in our community. So I think it's so important this evening that we have the opportunity to hear from these experts, as well as get some of our questions answered. So again, thank you to everybody for dedicating your time. Thank you to all of our panelists for all of the time you spent. And just a reminder that we're all in this together. We're all part of this. We can all do our part to mitigate the risk, to educate ourselves, and prepare in case there's a wildfire as well. So again, thank you very much. And I believe, pass it over to Jen Calloway next, our town manager.
Great, and just echo Mayor Romack's comments. Thanks to everybody for being here tonight and taking time away from your lives to join us in this important discussion. I'm only going to speak for a few minutes. We're here tonight to really hear questions from you and answer those questions. But I wanted to kind of bring us to the point of how we got here today. Our town council goes through a strategic planning session every 2 years and kind of reaffirms that plan in the off years. And emergency preparedness and partnerships, specifically with an emphasis on wildfire readiness, is one of our town council focus areas and one of our town focus areas. And that started about 3 years ago. And so with that, we have a work plan with 4 goals that outline how we're moving forward with emergency preparedness. And this is also in alignment with the recently adopted Truckee 2040 General Plan. The 2040 General Plan, the safety and noise element is really bolstered from the previous general plan. We weren't contemplating mega fires in 2006 when the 2025 plan was developed. And so there's a big emphasis on wildfire, defensible space, policies and programs to put in place to help mitigate the risks associated with wildfire, and then also emergency response and preparedness. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out and read the safety and noise element, we encourage you to do so. It's on our webpage, and we're always happy to answer any questions you may have after you read that. But coming out of the strategic plan and the 2040 general plan, you will see that we've really increased our budget appropriation for emergency preparedness. This is the first time the council has a dedicated, and the town has a dedicated division for emergency preparedness, and I'm really sorry about that echoing. We have one full-time staff person that Mr. Womack, who you'll hear from later, that this is what he does every day during storm events, weather-related events, and wildfire events. And then in this year's budget, we've hired a second person, partly for succession planning and also with the workload. So we've interviewed and we have a job offer out and are excited to hopefully bring in that person very soon and have some extra resources available. This is really just the staffing piece and some other sources to help with technology, but we have about another $500,000 or so in capital projects on top of this $400,000. So we are really growing this division and this program for the town, making sure that we can be as prepared and help you be as prepared as possible in the unfortunate event that we experience a wildfire or any other emergency. So with that, kept it brief. Happy again to answer any questions at the end if you have any. But Chief, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and let's start with our program tonight.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Just one announcement for translation. If anybody is in need of that, tenemos audio en español in the back there. So if that service is needed, it's there and available. First, I'd like to have our panel introduce themselves. So we'll go all the way down the staff table so everybody knows who's here, who's participating in this forum and discussion. So we'll go ahead and start it off with CHP.
Good evening, Chris Rarden, CHP Truckee Commander.
Good evening, Craig Griesbach, Director of Emergency Services for Nevada County OES. Hi, I'm Kevin McKechnie, Fire Chief, Truckee Fire Protection District.
Bob Womack, Town of Truckee Emergency Manager.
Lieutenant Sean Scales, Nevada County Sheriff's Office, currently assigned to OES.
Good evening. My name is Brian Estes, and I'm the CAL FIRE Fire and Unit Chief for the Nevada Yuba Placer Unit.
I'm Kirsten Kramer, the Superintendent Chief Learning Officer for Tahoe Truckee Unified School District.
I'm Steve Garcia. I'm the Unit Forester for the Nevada Yuba Placer Unit for CAL FIRE.
Good evening. My name is Bob Counts. I'm the Assistant Chief of the Eastern Division, which basically covers from about Auburn all the way to the state of Nevada for the Nevada Yuba Placer Unit.
And good evening. I'm Eric Hornvet, Wildfire Prevention Manager with Truckee Fire, so all things Measure T.
Ryan Ochoa, Truckee Fire Department, Battalion Chief in charge of EMS, Public Information, and Safety.
Thank you. Lisa Madden, Lieutenant with the Truckee Police Department. Devery Acuff, Admin Manager for the Police Department and Communications.
Ann Rarick with the Tahoe Truckee COAD, Community Organizations Active in Disaster, and 211 Connecting Point.
And I'm Todd Rivera, Assistant Superintendent, Chief Business Officer for the school district.
Okay, thank you, everyone. As you can see, we've got a lot of experience and a lot of folks in here that can answer the questions that our community has, that you all have. So I will encourage you to write down your questions, and so we can answer them and meet you where you're at. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Robert Womack, our Emergency Services Manager with the Town of Truckee.
Thank you, Chief. We thought it'd probably be a good idea to walk through how a incident would unfold, who would be the players, how you would get alerted, and what the evacuation would look like. Not that that's going to answer all the questions, but it might even spark some other ones. I realize that most of our calls here come in 911. We respond as unified command, meaning that if it's a wildfire, the fire personnel and the law enforcement personnel will be at the same location, co-located. Really, we talk about it as tailgate to tailgate, making decisions about how and what is going to happen so that we're getting the quickest information across the board with the best decision possible. It's important to realize that fire tells us where the fire is going to go, what it's going to impact, and then law enforcement is actually responsible for the evacuations. So then they are the ones that are figuring out what zones and how to start messaging people. Those notifications are really in California now spelled out very specifically. We have orders and warnings. With an order, it's an imminent threat. You need to leave now. And you will not be allowed back into the area. And that's really important because if we're putting an area in order, we want you to go now. We're saying that it is so dangerous you need to leave immediately. With warnings, we're saying there may be some time. How much time is obviously incident dependent. And if you're somebody who maybe needs a little more time or just is uncomfortable being in that area, or you have large animals, kids, whatever it happens to be, when you hear the warning, you might want to leave at that point. Nothing wrong with being the first people out because then you're not stuck in the traffic, quite honestly. The primary platform that the town uses is Code Red. We have that in partnership with the county. So Nevada County and the town of Truckee, and actually everybody in Nevada County uses Code Red. There could be some folks here that are from Placer. Placer uses Placer Alert, and it's built on Everbridge. We're more than happy to talk about how to deal with that, but that's Placer's baby and issue. We deal with Code Red. So signing up with Code Red, very easy. You can see there on the screen. You can QR code it. You can go to everything will take you to their website. The nice thing about Code Red, we have a partnership with 211 Connecting Point. If you really want to make it easy, just call 211 and they will walk you right through signing up on Code Red. Also realize you can receive messages in Code Red in Spanish. That's a choice when you sign up. It's a drop-down box, so if you want to get messages that way without looking for translation, having your phone translated or whatever, you can do it that way. We also use wireless emergency alerts. People hear about that. There is a test coming up, if I remember right, October 4th, Lieutenant? Yep. October 4th, that's a nationwide test where they're going to, basically the president, of course it's not the president, but FEMA is going to trigger a nationwide wireless emergency alert. So there'll be more information on that coming out, but everybody's phone should receive a message if it's set that way. You can actually opt out. Now, of course, this is a big thing. Every time you opt out of messages, you reduce the chances you're going to hear about something. But that's one of the best ways we have of alerting people in a specific area. It goes to your cell phone. I realize not everybody carries a cell phone, but certainly that is becoming the large-scale norm. The other thing is that when we're talking about emergencies and emergency alerts, particularly with wildfire, it's really weather dependent. We all know it's about to be a winter storm here in September. Kind of different for us, but the reality is that when you see those days with high temperatures, low humidity, and particularly high winds, the Weather Service will probably have a red flag warning. And those are the days when you really want to be cognizant and thinking about how you're going to get messaging. Is the gas tank in the car full? Do I know where the family is in case something happens? Because those are the days when a big incident's going to occur. The rest of the time, as the fire folks here will tell you, they're pretty good at it. And I'm sure that CAL FIRE and Truckee Fire can explain just how good they are. But for us, those are the days we worry about, and those are the days we want you to be particularly careful on. And also, I mean, I know people, they turn their phones off at night. Well, if you look back historically at a lot of our really large-scale fires that have bad outcomes, they happen overnight. So those are the days when you want your phone on, or your landline if you're using a landline service to be notified. Those are the days you want your phone on and ready in the night. We also have a couple other ways that we notify. Locally, 101.5 KTKE FM is a huge resource for us and broadcast in any kind of emergency. Channel 6, which is broadcasting tonight, is available to us. KOH 780 AM out of Reno is the local emergency broadcast system radio station. And then the town also has a local low power AM 1610 radio that we can use that is in a building that's generator protected, so it should be up and running no matter what else is going on. Just realize nothing's guaranteed in this world. So as best as we're going to try and get information out, we have to go back to, I cannot guarantee for everybody that they're going to get the message. That's where you need to start making the connections with your friends, your neighbors, the 5 people around you, particularly if maybe it's a second home. And those folks may not know what this all means. If you have the ability, knock on the door real quick and say, hey, we've been told we need to evacuate. That's one of the things we look towards. We also use the high-low siren on our vehicles to go through neighborhoods. Again, not a guarantee. We have a limited amount of resources in terms of people, and we're trying to get people out. We're trying to do evacuations. We're trying to control traffic. People may be calling and asking for help, 911 services. But if you hear the high-low siren, that means you got to leave now. We're leaving that area. You're probably too late at that point. You really should have been going already. But if you hear the high-low, that's the time to go. And then the only other thing is, we always say this, please make sure you have a plan for your children, your pets. Their pets stay home with them, or they stay at home and people go to work. What's your plan for your pet? There are plenty of children that can stay home throughout the day, be perfectly fine, but may not have a driver's license. What's the plan for them if you have to evacuate? I realize you want to get back in and get them. Even if we were going to let you in, the chances are the traffic is so bad that you're not going to get there. So have a plan for what you're going to do with family members, children, elderly adults that might not be able to evacuate on their own, and pets. Chief, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. So how we want this to go down is we want to be able to have an open conversation with you all here. So this is really question driven. We have a lot of folks here with, like I said, a lot of experience, and we want to meet you guys where you're at to be able to answer those questions. So we're not going to just present up here the entire time. So we want some engagement. You're here for a reason. We want to hear from you. So let's get this thing started. Let's ask some questions. Anything that's on your mind as far as evacuation, firefighting, fuels. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Zabriskie. We do have a microphone, so Devery's going to be going around passing that out. So just so it's recorded online here for our viewers, if we can get that one more time.
So the days of the town-wide siren are over?
Sure, we'll let you start with it, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, so Kevin McKegney, Fire Chief. So back when Truckee was a volunteer fire department, we did have a siren that would basically alert the volunteers to a call. That was before a good pager system. The volunteer firefighters would have a plectron in their residence. But if they heard the siren, then they would just go to the station. And so, yeah, that's been discontinued for I would say, decades now. There was one on the VA building, and there was one down on the old PUD building. And correct, we don't have those anymore.
And to kind of follow up on that, the chief mentioned something about a plectron in a house. And without getting down in the weeds, having lived here when those sirens were here, you didn't necessarily hear them if you were at Donner Lake inside a house. You didn't necessarily hear them if you were in Glenshire. Now, Glenshire back then was not very populated. So we often hear that question, well, what about sirens? And there's some validity to that, certainly. We did do a test with Placer County and Serene Lakes 2 summers ago now. And what we found out is it takes a lot of sirens because you can't really, with today's houses, as tight as they are, air standards, particularly if windows are shut, you're not going to hear them very well unless we have a lot of sirens. And so they're not as effective as they might seem. And certainly we've heard the comments coming out of Hawaii. But when you look at it, where they are the most effective is where there is only one threat. And while we're talking wildfire tonight, we obviously live where there's a lot of threats, unfortunately. You know, we have railway, we have the freeway, we have the pipeline, we have earthquakes. All those things do occur here. And so that siren is very dimensional in terms of what does it tell you to do. And that's really the big thing is we want to get a message out to give you the right message to go to the right place.
We also have some written in questions here, so yeah, go ahead.
So some time ago, I don't know exactly when, but I think it was through Code Red when I signed up that we got a zone identified. So I have that, magnetic thing stuck on our refrigerator. So how does that zone impact or affect the evacuation plan? Because I know the zone, but I don't know what that means when we evacuate. Do we go to Alder Creek side, or do we go down North Woods, or how are the zones affecting your plan of evacuation?
So what the zones allow, why don't we start with where the zones came from? So on the onset, the entire county was split up into 253 or 54 unique zones. Those zones were identified with the help of our fire partners, CHP. It wasn't just picked at random. They were picked based upon geography, topography, a variety of factors. So what that zone tells you is you know your zone. So our typical message, at least from the sheriff's office, is let's say it's due to a wildfire. This is the Nevada County Sheriff's Office. There's a wildfire located on No Name Street. Residents of zone NCO-E and then the zone number evacuate immediately. That's what it'll tell you. The message is essentially the same. It's a way to tell people in that zone it's time to evacuate. If you are registered or if you are in that zone and we have loaded all of these zones, the shape files for those zones into our Code Red system. So if you are receiving that alert from the Code Red system, it means that zone has been targeted specifically and whatever the message is, whether that's evacuation order, warning, shelter in place, could be a variety of things. So that's how the zone system works.
And like anything, we can't tell you ahead of time exactly where you're going to evacuate to because it's going to be dependent on the incident. We don't know where the fire is going to start, where it's going to blow to. We know, generally speaking here, that fires start in the, and go towards the northeast. That's based on our winds. So what we tell everybody is start thinking about, if I had to leave my neighborhood, how would I leave to get to the biggest street that is near me? We ultimately want to get everybody to the freeway and then ultimately out of town, if it's that big.
The other factor regarding Zone Haven is now called Genesis Protect. There's an app you can download. It's available on Android and Apple. That it's called Genesis Protect. When we toggle a zone, whatever we type specifically in that message will pop up on your phone if you're following that zone. Currently, you can follow one zone. There are plans in the future for them to expand that to up to 3 zones. So theoretically, if you've got the app downloaded, everybody's going to have their location settings and do what they want to do on their phones. Every phone is different, so I can't tell you what to do or exactly how it will work for you. It's going to be depending upon how you set up your phone. But if you're following a zone, you got your location turned on, we toggle that zone. That will likely be the first alert you receive. The next thing we do is we send a code red. If it's an order, the next thing we do after that is we send an IPAWS message. That's the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. So that gets us access to both the wireless emergency alerting system you heard Bob talking about and the emergency alert system, which goes over radio and television.
And we follow the same exact process. It's seamless, whether it's county or town, and really the only difference you'll see is who's sending the message, because we'll type that in the header.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'll go to the emailed questions that we had. We had a number of emailed questions. This author here is concerned about forest cleaning, especially in regards to Armstrong Track. So there's a lot of downed and old trees. That's a tinderbox. The writer said that she thought that we passed 2 tax increase measures to fund the forest management in Truckee and to help with this situation. Feels like the neighborhood is being left out, and however that money is being spent. I'll go ahead and give that to Measure T.
Perfect. Eric Hornvet, Wildfire Prevention Manager. I think it's a great question. I think, really the sense of our public has changed from NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. They didn't want to see forest management and fuel reduction changing the aesthetics, the view of the landscape. And now almost every single community wants every single focus of our inspections, our home hardening programs, fire-wise, insurability, fuels management, kind of that whole gambit of community wildfire protection in their neighborhood. So it's kind of a cool spot where we have the communities all raising their hands saying, yeah, bring this work into our backyard. So that's actually exciting for a lot of us because we're not running up against some of the traditional barriers that we might have even just a handful of years ago, right? Like pre-2018 campfire in Paradise, California. So one, that's unique. 2, the cool thing is we're actually doing a really big community wildfire protection plan right now. So we're actually currently going through a risk assessment, evaluating our forest conditions, forest health, fire behavior, fire spread, and creating a wildfire mitigation roadmap for our communities. And our goal is to get our agency crosshairs lined up, right? Where is our biggest fire threats, biggest impact, highest probability of intense fire spread that could impact our communities? And where is our community's priorities? Where are these areas in your community, in your backyard, where the crosshairs are? And when we start implementing this new CWPP going into next year, we can start on these areas where these crosshairs align. We have the community priorities lining up with the fire behavior and the agency priorities, and we can focus our actions in and get to work there. So I actually have a handout on the back right now. We have a CWPP survey available for the public, and this is the first step in getting these priorities identified at the individual neighborhood level. And then going into this winter, we're actually going to be having 4 or 5 community-focused meetings all about community wildfire protection planning. And we want to do exactly what this letter writer said. We're going to say, hey, we have Measure T, we have your tax dollars. Come to these meetings, show us your priorities so we can focus our wildfire mitigation roadmap and get to these priorities as quickly as we can.
Will the CWPP meetings be available like the last one from Nevada County was, like the luncheon, learn and luncheon, something like that?
So we will make them available. So our next, right now with the CWPP, is we almost have a draft document done. We've been working really closely with a tight-knit group of project team members. So good representation of kind of the main focus agencies in this area. We're going to be having a stakeholders meeting coming up in October. So this is really kind of going to be, ideally, it's going to be a suite of say 20 to 30 agencies, land managers, non-governmental organizations, nonprofit, kind of this bigger suite of large stakeholders. To really get a really good product, a draft CWPP in place, understand where all of our stakeholders are at, so that way we can bring a product to the community that's in draft phase. So almost like reviewing a general plan or an environmental document. This isn't quite the same, but the same approach. We want to have a good product, explain the priorities, explain the fire risk, fire hazards, fire severities, where we can focus our efforts, and then come out for the community. So our current plan is probably looking into maybe November and December, is having 4 community meetings, probably one near the summit, one in Glenshire, one maybe up in Tahoe Donner, and then one maybe here in kind of the more central Truckee area, maybe in this room, maybe at the airport. So that's our current plan. And so we'll be making sure we post those up here as we go into October, so we have, a month or two ahead of time when these meetings are, what time they'll be at. And then we're also planning on one kind of lengthy virtual feedback meeting as well, understanding we need to meet our community members where they are, and a lot of them might need to zoom in to be able to give their feedback and then understand the process.
Okay, thank you.
Mine is going to be a 3-part thing. Your timeline for you to do all of that you said and then move forward. And then will those be available on Zoom? So for any of us that can't attend one of those meetings, can we attend Zoom? And then does this encompass Nevada County, or are we talking Truckee only?
Great. Yeah, a lot of questions. We're planning on at least having the one available virtually. If we can get the capacities in to make the in-person ones recorded at the very least, we'll plan on doing that. There's a lot of efforts going on for community wildfire protection planning and implementation, right? So as I'm talking about this big planning effort, we still have hundreds of thousands of dollars going on in the community for existing projects, fuel reduction, and other projects. So the plan I'm talking about is specific to Truckee Fire Protection District's jurisdictional boundary. So that includes communities of the Donner Summit, all of the town of Truckee, and then some other unincorporated areas of Nevada and Placer County. So it's more specific to our fire district. At the same time, Placer County is working on updating their community wildfire protection plan, as is Nevada County, with Craig sitting up here as well. So a lot of efforts going into planning, a lot of work still happening to align general fund dollars, grant dollars from state and federal, and partnerships to get work done from all levels and all capacities.
Craig, can you expand on that on Nevada County side?
Yeah, of course. It's a unique opportunity with us updating these plans and creating these plans together in a lot of ways, because essentially Truckee Fire Protection District is a zoomed in view of our effort of the community wildfire protection plan. So ours is a zoomed out view of the entire county with four forecast zones. So hopefully you've heard a little bit about that. We've had some outreach via Zoom and in person, and we'll continue that through into approximately the winter. Our plan is hope to be finished right around this time next year, depending on progress and everything else. But like I said, the cool thing is these plans work in tandem. Essentially, it's just zoomed in Truckee Fire Protection District, and their plan will be an annex in our larger county related plan.
Thank you, Craig. Chief Estes, do you have anything to add from a state level?
Yeah, thank you. Brian Estes, I'm the fire chief for CAL FIRE in the Nevada Yuba Placer unit. So couple things. Placer is also updating their CWPP, which has been in existence for well over a decade. And as Craig said, I think the key with CWPPs is they are a stepping stone of different fundamental grassroots organizations in any community or any geographical area. And one of the outputs of those is, as was said, good planning and good awareness of where your target hazards are to focus fuel reduction efforts, inspections, et cetera. But it's also a conduit to access really important grant funding. And, the CWPP is kind of an overarching plan, but as important is the integration of the fire safe councils in an area, the firewise communities in an area, all of those things. The more that you bolster a geographical area with all those components, the higher propensity you're going to have for accessing those really vital grant dollars. And the CWPP is really a serious trigger point for accessing grant dollars. So from a state standpoint, we're very heavily involved in CWPP reviews. Chief Garcia, my unit forester here, works with Truckee Fire Protection District as well as both Nevada and Placer counties to ensure that, as Craig said, we're aligning the strategic priorities. The most dangerous thing we can do in the fire service is develop plans that are not coordinated, that are parallel, but they never cross. As was said, those crosshairs are never put on the table. And believe it or not, it happens. And so that collaboration and communication that we really enjoy up here in the Truckee region is really, really important to make sure that Truckee's CWPP as well as Nevada and Placer counties all have the same components.
Thank you, Chief. We'll go ahead and take our next question up here.
I'm a newcomer, so could you explain how I find my zone where I live? And secondly, what does CWPP stand for?
So regarding finding your zone, you can go to community.zonehaven.com, type in your address, zone number pops right up, provided you live in Nevada County. So Yuba County, Nevada County, we are both on Zone Haven. If you're in Placer County, they are not on Zone Haven. So they don't use that system at all.
And that's also known as Genesis Protect. We still mess that up, and thank you for reminding us that acronym-free zone, Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So we fall into the habit of using acronyms on everything, and don't hesitate to remind us.
Yeah, and on the CWPP part, that's a Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So this is actually born out of a 2003 Healthy Forest Restoration Act, and it was the best process put in place to identify wild hazard risks and create a collaborative plan where you address forest management and fuel reduction as well as structure ignitability.
Okay, great. Go ahead, sir.
Is it on? Okay, my name's Richard Harper. I'm a member of the West End Donner Lake Firewise community, and we've been doing this for 3 years, and we really appreciate that Measure T got passed. We helped to engage that, and we just recently received a grant to reduce our common area fuels by about $200,000. So along with the work we've been doing over the last 3 years, that's about $500,000 that we've spent trying to protect our community. We still have our concerns. There's only one acknowledged evacuation route for potentially 800 homes. And we've gone to Nevada County website and looked at the Landis evacuation software. I understand Truckee has this software also. So we ran the software, and it says we live right in the west end of Donner Lake. To get from there back to town, it's going to be 80 minutes. And we're like, 80 minutes. Okay, maybe that program's assuming it's the middle of summer. But that's a real concern, especially with one acknowledged evacuation route. Now, there's been discussions about our second evacuation route. We've gone to the state park. They've been responsive of cleaning up the edge of the road. They've identified a fire road that could be a second evacuation route. The local people know that's an evacuation route. They're going that way if they can't get out through Donner Pass Road. So that's an area that we'd like to continue to work on with the state park and with, the other agencies so that could be acknowledged as a secondary route. We know that State Fire Marshal has recently passed a law saying we want to identify all these communities. And when you have 800 homes, that's pretty significant to be dealing with. So we're looking forward to seeing that Truckee Fire engage that. We do appreciate, though, all the work that's going on. We feel safer all the time. So the other issue we kind of related to the CWPP is the state park now has land they've acquired in the last few years out past the west end of Donner Lake, and there was a CWPP area there. It's been there for 6 years, and it's now in the state park. So my question is, when these agencies are talking, is the state park part of that discussion? Are they going to help engage and do something about it? And I don't know who would answer that, but how does
Okay, who wants the first one?
I'll take the first one. To be clear, we do not recognize the state park access as an evacuation route, and we have to say that for a couple of reasons. The state parks has about 140 campsites that they're going to be trying to evacuate, and if we put people on top of people, when we have another route, that could be very detrimental. So the route out of Donner Lake is South Shore to Donner Lake or Donner Pass Road, where we can move people from there. Just to understand, I understand what you're saying, but we want to be clear that we don't recognize that as an evacuation route at this point, and it is very possible that that route will get fouled up and people could get trapped in there where we might have better luck somewhere else. So I get what you're saying, and we hear that about a lot of different roads around the area that people talk about, but there is those reasons that we want people to stay to town-maintained roads that we are able to make sure are safe with vegetation management and where we're going to have our traffic control to be able to move people. So just, we've had this discussion, but we always have to bring it back to, we have our recognized routes, they're listed on our website, that we use for evacuations.
Thank you, Bob. And then there was a state parks component, and I think that was specific to that particular route. No?
Was whether State Parks is a stakeholder on the steering committee for the CWPP. You got that, Eric?
Yeah, so State Parks was engaged in our CWPP process, and they have one primary forester, and they did not have a full desired capacity to be on the project team of our CWPP. They're typically managing their landscape through a lot of their own internal processes. But we will hope to have their forester, Rich Adams, in our stakeholder workshop and our collaborative meetings. So he's on our list for the invite there to get him engaged as a stakeholder and partner. And I think as a community priority during kind of the community feedback meetings, that's another great opportunity to kind of bring those community crosshairs up so that we understand that's a priority for the community. Do understand that chunk of dirt is a very tough piece of dirt to work. There is a lot of creeks, a lot of wildlife, a lot of granite, a lot of steep slope access. It is not what we would call low-hanging fruit that would be easy to work in. But if it shows up as a community priority and modeled wildfire risk as hazards, that would put it as a higher priority in our long list of fuels management work to do in our communities.
Okay, looks like we got another question back here in the back.
So I have two questions. One is for the, I think, CHP chief. So the evacuations can be really tough. I mean, it's tough even just during regular ski season or summer vacation where you're stuck on I-80 for like 2 hours. So how are you going to manage the I-80 so it remains open for us to evacuate to? So especially with increased traffic of semis and other things. And so that's number one. Number two is, why are we still allowing the stores to sell wood, the fire logs? I went to Boca to camp, and there was a family that was burning, like they were building a fire, and nobody was doing anything. So there is a host, but nothing was done. And that happened the week before when my friends went to camp there. So what can we do with this, burning at campsites when they can buy fire logs at the Safeway? I thought that something was passed where we don't do that and we obey the local laws of fire bans. So I don't really understand that we're talking about fire risk and we're still selling fire logs for people to burn at campsites.
It's a good question. Okay, so we'll take the first part of that. Who wants that one? Eric or Chris? CHP?
Yeah, I'll take the freeway part. So
we talked about the Palisades example in the Placer County discussion. The issue there is you have a bunch of people going to a place that doesn't have the capacity for all those people. And that's what clogs the roadway. If we could free flow all those people into a 6-story parking garage, that would flow just fine. The problem is we don't have that. And so you have people stopped on the roadway turning around and trying to figure out where they go next. Where do they go from there? And it's always tricky to turn people around from a destination they are headstrong on going to. So that's the biggest challenge we face when it comes to the traffic hitting the ski resorts. Getting people out of town, we're going to be working with our partners at Truckee PD as they manage the evacuation through town, getting them to the freeway. And our main focus will be getting people up and onto the freeway. Those will be the first points that our folks respond to make sure that's a free flow onto the freeway. Once they're on the freeway has capacity to handle the flow. And that's where our secondary resources come in. We start calling our assistance in from places like Gold Run, Grass Valley, Quincy. I don't know if you guys know, the Highway Patrol has the ability to scale up response. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had over 100 officers up here in the area training at the Truckee Airport. So our scalability is one of our resources that we bring to the table when we're assisting our allies. And so getting people up and onto the freeway and then bringing in additional resources to keep that freeway moving, removing crashes, removing disabled vehicles, assisting big rigs. One of the questions I'll just head off right now is the counterflow question. Not a good option, especially when you're trying to get resources into the area to fight the fire and provide emergency services. If we put a counterflow plan in place, those resources have no way of getting here. So I hope that answers your question on how we keep the freeway moving. If not, please let me know.
Does everybody know what counterflow or contraflow is? That's when we're using both lanes of east and west to go east or west, all one way. So obviously that hinders bringing emergency services vehicles in.
If I could add too, my office is directly across from the Caltrans Construction Management Office. They will pull construction if they need to, and they don't do construction when those high red flag days are. So that is something that, we talk about the traffic looking bad. They have the ability to pull most of that construction, and they will if we need to get onto that freeway.
Okay, thank you. And then the second part to that question, the campfires.
Yeah, sure. So the Truckee Fire Protection District adopted a campfire and charcoal barbecue ban back in 2019. And that ban applies to the Fire Protection District, the private properties, and it's intended for these backyard campfires primarily. It does not apply to federal campgrounds or state campgrounds, and so they're still allowed to do that. And I think one of the things that it does provide an outlet for that activity. This is a cherished activity to have a campfire. And so allowing people to do those in hosted campgrounds is, we think there is a benefit to that in lieu of going into, say, informal campgrounds to have that activity where it would also be prohibited. And then the other thing is we have partnered with the local retailers to apply some signage above their displays for those, whether it's charcoal briquettes or campfire wood, to basically alert people that there is a campfire and charcoal ban in the fire district. And so they may be making those purchases at risk if they're intending to use them at, say, a residence. And so we do have a partnership with the retailers, and we do appreciate having an outlet in the hosted campgrounds.
Okay, thank you, Chief McKechnie. Any other questions? Okay, I'll go back to our list here. The writer here, Truckee Fire District map shows jurisdictions extending to the Andesite Peak, Castle Peak, and Peter Grubb Hut, but not to Summit Lake or Frog Lake. Is this true? If so, how is firefighting coordinated among the various agencies with responsibility in this area?
So I'll take that first and then maybe pitch it over to CAL FIRE. But basically, there's three responsibility areas. There's LRA, SRA, and FRA. LRA is local responsibility area, SRA is state responsibility area, and FRA is federal responsibility area. And local responsibility area would be inside the city limits, basically, inside the town. So the town boundary would be local responsibility area. The unincorporated private property areas would be state responsibility area. And then the federal lands or the U.S. Forest Service would be the federal responsibility area. And so the areas reference, some of it's probably FRA, some of it's probably SRA. And so in terms of the responsibility, the agency who has that responsibility over the origin of the fire would be responsible for coordinating firefighting efforts. And so recently, last year, we had the Butterfield incident. That was down just below the airport here. And that was LRA, that was local responsibility area. And so that was the Truckee Fire Protection District's responsibility. When the fire occurs on private property and unincorporated areas, that would be a vegetation fire. Then that would be CAL FIRE's responsibility as the authority over state responsibility areas. And I'm sure Chief Estes or his team could elaborate on coordinating those firefighting efforts. We do all work together, and we work hard to protect our values at risk.
Yeah, well said, Chief, and he's spot on with those three ownership delineations. I'll add a fourth in there, and that's DPA, which stands for Direct Protection Authority. And in the area that is referenced in this question, that land up there is, generally speaking, surrounded by that federal responsibility area. So that would be the responsibility of the U.S. Forest Service. However, there are private properties within that, and some of those land ownerships are the Nature Conservancy, there's some Tahoe Donner, Homeowners Association influence, and other private entities in which those areas would fall under that state responsibility area. The other thing we have that's really unique here in Truckee that doesn't exist everywhere, and I think it's something that both Chief McKechnie and I, and Jen and Mayor Romack and I have worked on this for years. It's been in place for probably the better part of 20 or 25 years, and that's what we call a wildland protection agreement. And the town of Truckee, in about 6,800 acres of the local responsibility area of the town of Truckee that Kevin referred to, the town of Truckee pays the state for that essentially to turn that local responsibility area for wildland fires into state responsibility area. And so what the town in those 6,800 acres gets is the full breadth of both the local and the state response, meaning aircraft, crews, dozers, and the access like CHP does to that mutual aid system at no cost to the town of Truckee, which is really important. That's not the entire town of Truckee. There is still a lot of the town that falls within Chief McKechnie's primary responsibility. But in reference to this question, most of that is under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Forest Service. But I think the most important thing that Kevin mentioned is there's not a single fire that we have anywhere in this Truckee Basin area that does not have the full breadth of local fire districts, the state, and federal agencies. We really don't worry about the boundary lines until the smoke's cleared. We want to mitigate the emergency first and foremost. That protection of life and property is of utmost concern to both of our agencies.
Okay, thank you, Chief Estes and Chief McKechnie. We have a question over here.
Obviously, we have a lot of tourists in our community, more than 15 million a year right now. And I'm just curious what type of education and outreach and emergency preparedness we're doing with our short-term rentals, our hotels, and our tourism vendors.
So very good question, and you're right. That's one of our biggest target populations. Couple of things. One, that's why we really rely on the wireless emergency alerts. And one of the big reasons we went to the zones was because it makes it much easier. If I try and explain to somebody where Tamarack Street is on the west end of Donner Lake, the chances of them understanding that are almost nil probably unless they live down there. But if I tell them, and I quite honestly I don't remember the zone, but if I tell them it's zone 119 and that's posted in their residence, hopefully they're going to be able to know that. We require our short-term rentals to have that information. We give that information to our vacation property management associations, and we continue to press out information with things like Visit Truckee Tahoe and their website and their reach, which last I heard was north of 200,000. I mean, those are good numbers that we can push out information to. But unlike some communities where maybe you get to do it a couple times a year or you do it at the start of the year, for us, it's almost like we have to do it every week, and we have to keep reminding people and keep pushing it out there as much as we can. We also have a very strong partnership with Tahoe Donner Homeowners Association. That's where a large number of our second homes are. Obviously not all of them, but a large number. And so they're able to press information in email blast and their community letters and just their general every year kind of cycle of information they do. So that's a huge way we can reach out to that group.
The other piece of this as well, sorry, Danny, is our partnership with recreation departments or vendors or nonprofits. We do a lot of partnership with them to educate people where they are. So out on our trails, our lakes, whatever have you. We also table a ton at community events that a lot of our tourists frequent. An example of this is we had Outdoor Visitor Safety Fund grant that we funded several local partners for trail ambassador programs to educate people on the trail, increase trail signage, wayfinding, things like that. So we weave that in with those partners as well as our emergency preparedness partners.
Thank you, Craig. I'd just like to remind everybody that we do have interpreters here, so let's try to talk a little bit slower, give them time to keep up. I know they're busy back there. Next question.
As a tag along to that, I understand the town recently implemented a flock camera system and a Landris system. Can you explain how that supports our evacuation process?
Sure, thank you. And it's twofold. So Flock is a license plate reader system. It has obviously a law enforcement component where we can, I'll say it this way, we can find the bad guys and try and catch them. And we've had some success with that, obviously, recently. But it also provides, this is where I really get into it, it provides us the ability to do better car counts because we have it in strategic areas in town. So like the entrance to Tahoe Donner, both entrances. And we're able to count cars going in and out, and we can tell in a 24-hour period the number of unique license plates that have gone up and down those hills. So often people come here, residents do the same thing. We make 3 or 4 trips a day. And so if we were just to count those cars, we wouldn't have a very accurate number. But with unique license plate reads, we have a very good idea of how many cars are in the different areas. I don't get any information about who owns the cars or where they're from, so solve that one right now. All I'm worried about is how many cars are there, because then I can take that information and I can put it into a company we use. The town is very much on the cutting edge of these kind of things. Ladris is a startup company, a couple of local boys in Nevada County that are making good. And what they do is they do estimates for evacuation timing. There is a forward-facing or public-facing part, as was mentioned, that you can go to the Reading, Nevada County website and find that. It has the town, it also has the county, and you can put in different parameters. We have a whole lot more that we drill down on our side to give us even better numbers, and we can adjust the numbers. Obviously, they have to pick some numbers. We're able to look at specific numbers for dates and times and get really kind of more accurate evacuation information. Some of course, on the best of circumstances, but it gives us an idea of what it's going to take to evacuate different areas and where our pinch points or choke points might be that we need to staff, and where we need to put people to make the best evacuation possible.
I was at a meeting similar to this at the high school about 4 years ago, and they were saying a contraflow system was going to be in place to accommodate all this extra traffic. I'm just wondering what happened to that. Secondly, what's going to happen if there is a wildfire that originates in the basin, and I'll have all these other people from the basin coming up 267 and 89? Are there going to be some kind of choices to be made about that? And are there going to be officers manning intersections to kind of negate the street lights and just get people coming on through?
Trade, we'll both do it. As to the 4 years ago, I was in the position, I don't know that we've ever talked about wanting to do contraflow. I know people bring that up, and I know it works in hurricanes. It's very labor intensive, and they don't have what we have with either the canyon or the summit, where there are parts of those roads that we, as the chief noted, would not be able to get emergency equipment in. We would be, whatever we have here is what we have. So I'm not sure about the 4 years ago, but no, for the exact reasons the lieutenant mentioned, we have to be able to bring people in, and we know we have the roadway capacity. We may end up having to, and he can talk more to this, kind of do the winter thing on the eastbound side down at Applegate, because there's room down there. But for anybody that's been to State Line and the snowstorm, if we shut traffic there, we have in effect not only stopped our emergency vehicles, potentially if we had to evacuate something like a hospital, not our first choice by a long shot, but that's where many of our ambulances would be coming from. We couldn't get them here. And if we have to evacuate people, we can't get our buses back because they're stuck down there. So there's a lot of reasons besides just a basic idea, but there's a lot of thought that went into that. So I hope that kind of helps a little with that.
Felt okay. 4 years ago, felt okay as a solution. When you're saying that you're backing down from that and just doing two lanes, it's just like, because there's a whole lot of people here.
And there is. I mean, and we have to look at everything. And, would we sit here and say, as I started off with, there's no guarantee of anything. Is there something else? Well, we might have to do something. But, you're feeding one-lane roads into the freeways. So there's ability to hold that. As to the basin issue, this is where there has to be a little bit of a gut check. A fire that starts there probably doesn't affect Truckee right away. So to your point, we're going to force through and get people onto the freeway so we can unload that. And I'll let the lieutenant talk about that, because Placer County, they're responsible for that traffic issue.
Yeah, so we would work with Placer, get the evacuation plan, and then as I kind of alluded to before, we have scalability. So if it's deep into the basin and we need multiple resources to get them through these pinch points, these intersections, we'll call for them. Absolutely.
I think, one of the other points, and we may talk about it in a bit, but, the evacuation on roadways is just one of the strategies or tactics that's going to be used in that unified command. And depending on the situation, depending on the movement of the fire, depending on the threat from one geographical area to another, it's very common for the fire agencies working with the law enforcement agencies to make a decision to utilize what we call shelter-in-place areas, or sometimes temporary refuge areas, where you can put a large number of people into an area safely and have them be relatively unaffected by the incident. And when we look at the Truckee Basin, I think about places like the airport, that frankly you could put a large number of people in the case that an evacuation route was compromised. So, when we talk about contraflow or 2 lanes or 1 lane or 267 or 89, they're all very, very important questions. And ultimately, we want to get people out early. But we do have a number of arrows in the quiver that in that unified command model that Kevin was talking about, we're going to consider all those options and make those decisions in a unified manner.
Thank you, Chief. We got a follow-up here?
I'm on our Firewise committee in Prosser, and even though it's not spoken, but in casual conversation, we have a lot of people that are saying, oh, if the roads are all jammed up, I'm going to go down and hang out at Prosser and or go back route into Reno through Boca. And I'd like to have the officials address the potentials for death from smoke inhalation from those areas.
I'm glad you said it.
Well, I know how bad it is.
As for the roads, that is an interesting point. Those are county maintained roads. So they get a little bit different level of service than some of our other dirt roads in town. Can't say that that's not a good idea because it is a county maintained road. It's going to be rough, and I'm not suggesting that every two-wheel drive car in the world is going to like it, but that is a county maintained road. I'll let the fire guys talk about getting around smoke and fire and being near a lake and whether that may not be a great idea either. Okay, I'll bite. Just remember that, that water gets cold and there is a lot of smoke. And although it was successful in the Paradise Fire, it may not be the thing. A lot of people talk about, well, I'm going to do this. As Chief Estes mentioned, go early and you don't have to do this. That's got to be a big thought here is if I'm waiting till the very end and I'm forced into those kind of decisions, yeah, that may be a better one than the alternative, obviously, but the really better decision is leave first.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I realize that the public wants a roadmap, that for an unforeseen emergency that we can't predict, that we don't know is coming, that we don't know where it's going to start, with what wind direction and with what intensity. And we would love, in all aspects, we would love to be able to provide the public with a roadmap that works every single time the same way. But frankly, that option just doesn't exist. And I think, we can't ignore the fact that the system we have here in the Truckee Basin in our region and the relationships that we have on this dais to make those unified decisions and the expertise that comes with that, as Robert said, the best case scenario is to make those decisions early and get people out early on roadways that are safe, not county back roads, not going to Boca or to a water source. Ultimately, that's what we want to do. But we have a number of strategic options available to us as the intensity or direction or the situation changes. I would love to be able to give you, a 8x10 or a 11x17 map that says do this every single time the same way, and we're going to guarantee your safety, but we can't do that.
My question is, do you guys, I see so many of you from all these different organizations, do you guys get together regularly and do war games type stuff to figure out what, how this is going to happen, if this happens, if that happens?
Yeah, I'll start out and then I'll turn it over to Kevin. Kevin and I were together at the Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs Association this morning over in Tahoe Douglas. We have one of the more unique fire chiefs associations probably in the state, in that our fire chiefs association up here incorporates 2 states and 5 counties, 3 national forests, and involves local, state, federal law enforcement agencies. We meet regularly and we train regularly. And it's a very important commitment. In fact, This summer, we committed as a regional group to a number of different community meetings. We put a fairly large-scale exercise on in Olympic Valley, where we went through unified command drills, evacuation drills, training elements, and ran real-time scenarios. We're committed as a group of chiefs to do that annually and to shift that around the region and around the lake, because we don't care if it's in Nevada, state of Nevada, or Nevada County, Placer, El Dorado. It doesn't matter to us, because we're all going to come together and mitigate the incident together. So we want to train as a regional group. And then I'll turn it over to Chief McKechnie.
Yeah, absolutely right on. We did the unified command training, and that just allows fire guys to exercise with law guys, and it's really good. It's exactly what you're thinking. It's basically war games. It's a bunch of different scenarios: wildfire, active shooter, civil unrest. And so we're making sure we can communicate with the public, and so that's going on.
In 2022, we did a tabletop exercise in this room. Many of the people that are on the dais were there, about 75 people, where we talked about a fire encroaching on the town and the different steps we'd have to take. Most springs, this year it was in Placer. We have done something locally with the fire district where we actually do that tailgate to tailgate and have CAL FIRE there so that we're all talking to each other ahead of time. We did one in Todd Honor, which was a much larger exercise where we actually sent people out to try and do different things. So to your answer or your question, yeah, there's a lot of that behind the scenes. Some of it we publicize real well. Other of it, we're doing it and we're just not doing a good job at showing people.
The other thing is, unfortunately, we've had quite a bit of practice over the past few years. So all of our agencies respond in mutual aid. I've been at every major fire we've had in the North State since the Camp Fire. On Lobo McCourtney Fire, we had a bunch of folks up for that, and it's kind of sort of what we have to do now to be successful at what we do. If you asked us the same question back in 2010, you would have got a different answer. So we're very lucky to have the partners that we have. Everybody's got each other's cell phone numbers, and there's no egos involved or anything like that. It's all about just getting the mission done.
All right, great. Thank you. Got a question over here, and then we'll work our way back over that way.
So for many years, I live in the Armstrong Track, and we would mitigate our landscape and make sure it was fire safe. And 2 doors down, they wouldn't do anything. And every time I talked to Truckee Fire or NorCal, they said there are no laws in place to make that neighbor comply. Is that changing? What can we do to make that change? Because I can be as safe as I want, but if my next 3 neighbors don't do anything, then, I'm SOL. So how do you guys address that going forward with the CWPP and that? Because you got to have some kind of remediation, something in place where if you don't comply and you're putting the neighborhood at risk, then, something's got to give.
I'll take that one. The Truckee Fire Protection District does have a defensible space ordinance, and it does include enforcement provisions. We have exercised those provisions to go down the legal route, and including citations and court hearings, and it just takes a lot of effort. And what we found is we get a lot more out of the friendly approach of coaching people along and educating, and Eric's got a great team that does that really throughout the town. But there is a mechanism there to go to enforcement. We've actually worked with the town of Truckee through some condemnation process and putting properties into receivership, but it's very complicated, but it can be done. And typically we engage other partners with that. It ends up in the court system. So hopefully that answers your question.
So if you're not getting quite the response, I understand that it takes a while, but if you've kicked doors, made phone calls and everything, and you still see no progress happening, which one of you guys do I call for direct contact to actually get the ball going?
You can call us. And yeah, we can. In fact, in Armstrong Track, we've actually done the work, and so there's some other provisions where we can just go onto the property and make it fire safe if we've gone down the appropriate route. And so we can go do the work. We actually did that in Armstrong Track and attached the bill to the property taxes so that we can get reimbursed. And so, but yeah, I mean, we have a complaint program so we can receive your complaint, and Eric's team will go out and take a look at it.
Thanks, Chief. I know we got some questions back over here.
Hi. First, I wanted to say thank you for all coming. This is really great. A lot of manpower here tonight. It really makes Truckee a great community to see all this come together. So, I have a real specific question. At the top of Olympic Heights, there is a gate that blocks a town-maintained utility road, and I have, in other situations, seen those gates with breakaway capability, and I'm just concerned under a very probably unusual circumstance that if people either above Olympic Heights or below Olympic Heights had to go down that road, how could we get that thing open? So I don't know who would.
I'll take that initially. That gate and that road are in place as emergency vehicle access, and that's intended for the fire department to get into an emergency. I don't believe it's intended for evacuation. Right, understood. Right.
So to add to that a little bit, there's a long history with that road. I want to be careful because you said town maintained, and although we use it in the winter to cross back and forth for snow removal, that's under an easement. It's not actually a town maintained right of way. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff, it's very complicated how we can and cannot do certain things. The one good thing, the lock that is on there is what's called a Knox lock. All of the fire staff have it, and other law enforcement, our law enforcement have the ability to open that gate. And so in the case of, say, a fire that started below Olympic Heights, and like you said, we had no way of getting people out except to go that direction, we do have the ability to open that gate if we need to, whether it's fire or law. I hope that helps a little bit. I know there's a lot to that. I gave you about a 10-second thing that's about a year or two's worth of I've heard about it.
Okay, next question.
This is going to be my last question. So I really appreciate everybody coming together and working together so well and wargaming wildlife catastrophes, but I'm sure the prevention is key to surviving. And, we're all here probably because we're full-time residents trying to save our only home that we have. But as someone mentioned, this town is 60% second homeowners and a bunch of tourists coming in with very poor knowledge of fire bans. And I find it very disappointing that every year the fire ban education is very lacking. And I see this digital sign on Donner Pass Road and one on Northwoods, and everybody's, speeding at 40 to 50 miles an hour. They're not seeing that sign. I see a better sign for flu shot than for fire ban. Is there any way the town can do a better job of publicly displaying fire ban so that people just don't come visit here and buy a bunch of charcoals and stuff because they are sold at the store and they don't know the fire bans in Tower Donner or in Truckee?
Chief McKechnie, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, so we do, and I might punt over to Chief Ocho on this one, Public Information Officer, but we do reach out on social media. We engage with the Homeowners Association to get the word out, also with Visit Truckee Tahoe, and so I feel like we are doing a pretty good reach. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we get called out frequently for charcoal barbecues or backyard campfires. And originally, when we did the campfire ban, we were actually seeing some illegal campfires and some illegal barbecues. That number's gone down substantially. And so we are getting reports from neighbors. And if that happens, we're happy to go out and investigate. But really what we're finding is legal campfires, which are little gas fire pits and gas grills. And so we do feel like our outreach is working. I will let Chief Ochoa chime in.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, most of the fires that have started in the Truckee Fire Protection District were caused by either poorly disposed ashes from briquettes or campfires that weren't put out in somebody's backyard or something like that. So that's kind of where the burn ban ordinance came from. We moved those signboards around throughout the beginning of summer to really focus on different areas. And the reason why that one's been up in Tawadana for so long is that seems to be where kind of most of the ordinance complaints that we get are at. Tawadana's done some really good messaging for us in their mailers. I believe we have stuff in STR Homes in their little pamphlet that talks about our burn ban ordinance. I work with JD over at KTKE where we have messaging and stuff the beginning of summer, and they're really great at getting the message out for us. We do social media stuff. But I don't, like Chief said, I don't have the numbers either, but I do know the first couple of years that we had the ordinance, we were close to 100 911 calls for service for the ordinance, complaints and people having campfires and stuff, and that's significantly down. I don't even know if we're over 30 this year, to be honest. So I think the messaging is working and the education is working, and really, you know, we get called, we go out there. Oftentimes it is a propane or a gas-fired fire pit in somebody's backyard, which are totally allowed by the ordinance, and other times it just takes a little bit of education, and we educate the people, and it doesn't seem to happen again.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if you have any estimate of how long it'll take to evacuate all the peoples in Tawadana area, and at what occupancy?
I'll be honest, I'm going to give generalizations because I don't have the numbers in front of me. It's about if you look at July 4th, which tends to be our peak summer period, it's about 2 hours for a vehicle. That's not the total evacuation time, but for a vehicle to make it from Tawadana. Again, we look at a point of safety, and for us, that's the interstate. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get to the other side of the summit or all the way to Reno or something like that, because once you get to the interstate with the area that we have around the interstate and work that's been done there, it's probably a pretty safe location. Total, we look at about 5 hours to get everybody out. Now, again, that is assuming everybody wants to leave. And there will be slow periods of time in there. So, but those are so 2 hours is the longest that we predict for a vehicle. There's a lot of shorter ones. And 5 hours if everybody starts leaving when we ask them to leave.
Yeah, we got a question up here in the front.
So is this working? Yes, it's working. All of us are struggling with fire insurance, right? I mean, it is serious. The insurance companies are leaving California for a number of reasons. One of the things that, doing some studies, looking and trying to understand what's going on, the insurance companies use something called IBHS. They study how homes burn, right? 90% of the homes are burning because of embers and the issues with embers. So we're doing the right thing with Zone 0. We're trying to improve that, but we're not doing a very good job with wood decks. So the Canadians are. The Canadians have studied this. They show that our homes are burning because the wood decks are catching on fire. Our state fire marshal has Class A and Class B people talk about using these materials, they're combustible. And eventually, if there's enough embers, and they may not burn, but the Doug fir framing is going to burn. So what they've said in Canada is, we'll use metal framing and try to stop these wood decks from burning. So, you know, if you look at Greenville, took 30 minutes. We don't have 3 hours to get out of Tahoe Donner, potentially, if the wind's blowing. The real issue is, how do you stop the fires? In Santa Rosa, they realized that the wood fences were catching each house on fire, and it was just racing through. The fire department went through. If you watch the videos, they knocked down all the wood fences, right, to try to stop the fire. So wood decks are an issue. We've discussed it a little bit with the town of Truckee building department, and they said, well, we've done some things, but really CAT will really have a fit if we come in and try to mess with the wood decks. Who's CAT? The contractors, right? They like building wood decks. I think the town could do something to help improve the fire potential with wood decks, because they're everywhere, if they put their mind to it and work with the contractors. But the town really has some responsibility to help us mitigate. Otherwise, we're all going to lose our fire insurance. So I don't know if there's some way we can, you know, you got to be careful with the contractors, because that's their income, but they could be building non-flammable wood decks pretty easily. The Canadians are doing it. So
I'll hit on that just real quick, and I'll pitch over to Eric Hornvet so he can sell his home hardening rebate that we just launched. But that's really what the answer is, I think, is home hardening. There is a good answer to a wood deck, and that would be replacing that first board, that board that's right next to the house, with like a graded, basically a slotted metal piece that allows those embers that may be swirling around and on the wood deck next to the wood house or the wood siding to drop down and get to that zone 0 in hopefully sort of a protected area. But yeah, Truckee Fire has just recently launched a home hardening rebate that could help out the contractors and the homeowners.
Yeah, Rick, I'll jump in a little more on that one. So, you know, with our inspection software, right, we're using this new tool called Fireside, and it's comprehensive. We're looking at all the home characteristics, so structure hardening, whether it's resilient or vulnerable, and defensible space, and really trying to integrate in the creation starting with the house, with zone 0, right? The stuff you can do that first weekend after an inspection, you know, removing pine needles, combustibles right next to the house, with the priorities for insurance. And wood decks, frankly, aren't one. Chapter 7A building code still allows wood decks, and Safer from Wildfire's insurance program is not giving you an insurance benefit from replacing a wood deck. They're giving you an insurance benefit for clearing the vegetation on and below the deck. So to get the best pieces going for insurance and mitigating that ember ignition vulnerability near the home, I think it's looking back at the report you have from the house from Truckee Fire, using the green waste programs, and using this brand new home hardening program we just launched, right? We're saying we have $500. You can use it for the high priority home hardening items, right? It's upgrading your vents to 1/8-inch metal mesh or WUI rated vents, removing that first 5 feet of combustible fencing or combustible gates and going non-combustible. If you wanted to go as far as upgrading a roof or siding or wood decks or going after some of those other non-combustible pieces, if your house already has everything else, that would still be eligible as long as it's called out on the report. So I think there's options out there. And, you know, I think the town, as they called out in the general plan, you know, they do want to work with the fire district and with CAT and with the building communities to update some of these building code and vegetation standards for new construction as well. And you know, I think the priority list you're seeing from the state is always non-combustible, ignition-resistant, combustible products. And I think we can get that material out there. And I think as agencies, maybe we can do a better job trying to advocate that to CAT and some of our contractors, and hopefully solve it with some of those pieces too.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here. And Eric, you hit it on the head. So for future construction going forward, part of what was adopted with the general plan is fire-resistant building materials and updating our code to require that, and the same with landscaping and vegetation. So not in place yet, but we're looking at that, and we'll be having those conversations.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Could you describe the extent to which the Forest Service is working with the state and local agencies on wildfire prevention, suppression, and evacuation? I didn't see anyone from the Forest Service here, so I don't know who can take that question.
Okay, first, that's my fault, my bad, not the Forest Services. So I'll take the fall on that one. I missed getting them here. So Forest Service is fine. It was me that forgot to invite them.
I can speak to that a little bit. Depending on the agency, depends on their available resources, whether you talk about Tahoe National Forest, BLM, or some of our state partners. So we're trying to figure out ways to how can we work with them easier to access funds? How can we do work on their properties more seamlessly and weave them into grant projects and qualifying funds that we can actually work on federal land? So something we're working on right now is a master stewardship agreement with the Tahoe National Forest. If we can establish that, that will allow some good neighbor authority, us to be able to go on their lands and weave their acres into projects. And it's something we're working similarly with Truckee Fire Protection District. So that's one way we can expedite work happening on their property, regardless if they can do it or not. But it is a challenge, I will say.
We have one of the most, sorry, sir, but just to tag onto that, we have one of the most complex land ownership areas of anywhere in the United States, and it's traced all the way back to the building of the Transcontinental Railway. And when you look at a land ownership map, it truly looks like a checkerboard, section by section. And so, as Craig said, while the federal government can be cumbersome sometimes with the NEPA process and the policies, we are committed, both our local districts and the state, we are committed to working with them. We can't not work with them because there's not a single incident I've ever been to in this region where one ownership is not affecting potentially another ownership. So yes, we are working with them. And as Craig said, I mean, using things like the Good Neighbor Authority and these master stewardship agreements are some mechanisms to try to decrease some of that bureaucracy.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Chief. We've got a question right here.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the CWPP and/or increased defensible space requirements will help lower the insurance rates. I think when I applied, I live in Tahoe Donner, and I mentioned this wonderful defensible space plan that they have where, every resident needs to do their defensible space every 5 years now, probably every 3 years. And the insurance companies just did not respond at all with any help. So I'm wondering if maybe the CWPP plus more on defensible space might help get some recognition by maybe even the state plan, but at least maybe some of the private insurance companies. Has anybody noticed whether the CWPPs count for anything there?
I think time will tell. It's a little too early, but I think that the reality is that it should, right? We're reducing the risk, so we should be rewarded for reducing the risk, and that should be evaluated based on rates and availability of insurance. That isn't necessarily the case, even though there are some discounts related to improving the hardening of your home or defensible space, what have you. So we'll see over the next couple of years. This is a hot topic at the state and federal level. We've been working with Senator Alvarado Gil on potential legislation or a bill moving forward and sponsorship of that bill related to insurance, exactly addressing some of the issues you're talking about, but time will tell. Eric, I don't know if you have anything further, or Chief.
I'll just chime in real quick. There was a good article in Moonshine Inc. on insurance, and they did report that I think with good forest practices, you could get a 40% reduction in premiums. That was based on information from the Nature Conservancy and studies done in the, I think it was maybe Goose Meadows Reservoir area on flame lengths. And so I think, like Craig said, time will tell, but hopefully our work will pay off.
Hold We need you on the mic, sir. We need you on the mic so everybody can hear us at home.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you have you tell all the neighborhoods, oh, you have to do this for the defensible space, but you don't come back. If you come back and say, all right, Tahoe Donna has done their stuff, and we're going to give you an A now, and you publish that, then the insurance companies can say, well, the insurance companies really want to, insure your home. They want to make money, but they want to have a reason, and they want to have someone with authority to say, hey, this is safer than that, and then maybe the insurance companies will, all come back and, risk being here.
I have something on that. So I would urge everybody to take a peek at what happened in Florida with states urging insurance companies to issue discounts based upon, in their case, hurricane protections that were put in place by homeowners. They started out with, I believe, close to 30 insurance companies doing business in the state, and they're down to 3 or 4. The number one factor in insurance in California, as listed by State Farm and all of the other companies who have said that they're not going to do business in California, is rebuild cost. We will see what happens with everything, but it's going to have to be a work on multiple fronts to get that to happen.
I'm wondering what can be done to limit sort of HOA restrictions on imposing defensible space. We live in Glenshire, and if you want to remove a tree, not even a very big tree, it has to go through design review committee. There's a $100 non-refundable fee. And yeah, if you're removing a tree, it's a lot of money anyway, but there's just those extra steps and the extra costs.
I'll jump in on this one. And maybe I'll put myself on the pedestal too. I mean, I think if a community comes together and goes maybe through a Firewise conduit or something that has backing of this is a barrier to creating effective defensible space, I think going to an HOA meeting, presenting that as an issue is a real way to get change in your own, CC&Rs, your code covenants and regulations, or a policy that requires that. And we have standing here. You can look, the TRPA, right? So a regulatory agency in Tahoe had a 6-inch diameter limit. They went under pending litigation and threat from the community post-Angora fire that was a cause of homes igniting. And as a regulatory agency, they bumped their diameter limit up to 14 inches unless it was a tree that was right in front of, a house in a lake. So I think there is some stuff you can look at kind of regionally of where it makes sense to maybe, wow, if TRPA bumped up to a 14-inch diameter limit, no permit, no forester needed, maybe my neighborhood should do the same thing. So I think working through your neighbors, working through your Firewise, working through your HOA, you have the ability to amend and change those CC&Rs or policy in your own neighborhoods. And I think you have some fire backing and, maybe some agency support with some of that, unintended regulation.
Okay, we'll get up here. And then I'm going to go to a couple of these questions just so the viewers at home get their questions answered as well.
I have grandchildren at Truckee Elementary School, and does the school system have a plan to make it easy? Because it's, as I think most of us probably know, it's already a challenge sort of meeting kids at the at the school gate. So if there were an emergency during the day and an evacuation was happening, does the school district have a plan to help reunite the family car and the kids?
Yes, we do. We have safety plans that are reviewed each year by our partners, and we work with communication and collaboration with all of our teams. So if evacuation is the best, we have reunification locations identified, and then we have a system called Blackboard that parents sign up for, and we can push out phone calls, texts, and emails right away to let people know what is happening and where to reunify with their child. But the most important thing is, in an emergency, parents understandably want to go to the school site, but we ask families not to do that, to follow the directions and go to the reunification location instead, so that we can get the buses and all the kids off the site and then meet up at another predetermined location.
Thank you, Kirsten. go back to a writer here in the Glenshire area talking about communications and cell phone service. Service is deplorable at best. And how will this work as far as communications during a wildfire when the power is out? They have Optimum as TV, internet, phone, and when its service is power dependent, we'll have no phone during an outage, even when we're on a generator. Can the town work with the cellular providers to increase service to the area? I feel that public safety concerns should be high priority in order to get out to the neighborhoods, cell phone coverage to each and every person. Who wants to really hit on that when it comes to emergency operations, notifications, alert, and warning?
Well, I think you kind of told me who it is. Yeah, and understand that as I go through this, I really get it. You know, I'm a resident of this town. I know that cell service is not great. We also know, and we've all seen, that the last mile rural broadband is a problem. And these are some of the reasons why, besides just the fact that we want to be able to get on the internet, is that it is the way a lot of communication, not just emergency communication, happens. With that, there are places in mountainous regions that are not going to have cell coverage. It's even actually worse on the west side in lower areas than it is here. We have really fairly good cell coverage. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like that, particularly if you live in that site. And it doesn't matter what cable system it is. Cable systems are power dependent. They do not have the kind of backup power that the old copper phone lines had. And so that is exactly correct. If the power goes out to an area, cable providers will not be able to stay up. Now, with that in mind, we engage, and so does the county, with those cell providers, with the cable companies, as soon as we have an incident, to try and, as best we can, support them, keep their sites up. When it comes to the cell towers, have backup generation, whether it's solar or whether it's some sort of generator system. So we understand that. We also understand that most of our infrastructure here is overhead, and we had that problem in the Butterfield fire where a fiber line was actually over the fire, and that's one of the reasons why we lost some of the systems we did. What's that all mean? That's where we start talking about you need to be weather aware so that when we have those days that are particularly bad, you're thinking about, hey, what do I do if something happens? What neighbors do I have that might have cells that work? What are the other ways that I can get messaging? The radios and things like that will still work. Yeah, it's difficult, but we live in a rural environment, and we cannot guarantee that we are going to be able to keep communications up everywhere. And there's not a simple answer when it comes to these kind of things. The town really doesn't have the ability to tell Verizon to have a better system because it may not even be something that they can fix. They'd love to provide service probably everywhere if they could too.
Thank you, Bob. Another question here. Looks like it's a three-part question. We already answered two of them, so it'll be the first one, which is kind of open-ended here. It says, what are the lessons that can be learned from the tragedy in Maui?
I'll grab that one again. And for those folks that have either talked to me, listened to me talk on the radio recently, shout out to 101.5 KTKE. We spend a lot of time on that radio, both myself and the fire folks, trying to get messages out. But it's probably too soon, really, to look at the stuff that's happened in Hawaii. You can listen to news reports, but as we learned in the Camp Fire, it took a couple of months before we really started to get true information. But it's pretty easy to look at it and say, yeah, that was a fire that had started in the afternoon, continued, reignited, and it was really in the middle of the night when the problem started. So they had some time there. So what's the message that I can say, the takeaway message that I'm already seeing? Go early, go soon. When we tell you to get out, you got to get out, because these fires, when they get fast and moving, have been burning for a little while. They don't start that way. They have to get big. And so if we are telling you to get out, if we're even in the warning status, those are the times to think about leaving.
Chief, I'm not sure your microphone is on.
Thank you. Let me start over. When we had the Butterfield fire, the writer here was in the Martis Camp area and wanted to get into Glenshire. It took 2 hours to get down Schaefer Mill Road. What is the evacuation plan for that area? If Martis Valley residents needed to evacuate with all the workers there, would be mayhem.
Well, there's a really important part of this that we have to look at. The Martis Camp and the Martis Valley area were never threatened. We did not put resources there to try and alleviate a traffic issue where there was no threat. We put traffic issues and resources where there were threats, potentially where the fire was going to move into in Glenshire. It's unfortunate, but yeah, we heard about that, and people asked me, well, why didn't you notify us specifically that we weren't threatened? And I think I heard from somebody earlier, how do you prove a negative? But the truth is, those areas weren't threatened, so we put our resources where there were threats. I get it, but we'll turn that around. If we have a threat in that area, then we're going to be looking to our partners, CHP, because it's in Placer County. But where we will put resources there to move people through signalized intersections and get them out to the freeway.
And just to add on to that, there are actually 4 ways out of those developments. There is a gate that can take you up towards North Star. There's Schaefer Mill Road, and then a couple others out of Schaefer Mill subdivision through Ponderosa Rancho. So they do all end up on 267 or Brockway Road, but there are other ways out.
Okay. Any more questions from the audience? Everybody has all. Oh, we've got one over here.
Hi, I just wanted to know if there is some type of program to assist our seniors or disabled who cannot afford to pay for defensible space, and they cannot do it on their own, and also the low income who cannot afford to do it on their own.
I could take a stab out first, then maybe send it over to Truckee Fire. We've had several programs through various grants that we've received, our Access and Functional Needs program. So we just finished up a phase 1 this last year that provided free defensible space clearing for homeowners that qualified, whether it's low income, with disabilities, elderly. There's some qualifiers there. It is a FEMA federal grant. So we are waiting for funding for a phase 2 of this grant. We have approved a lot of those properties that are pre-qualified through that grant, but we are always seeking funding opportunities for AFN support because, as was mentioned earlier regarding defensible space clearing, it's frustrating when some of your neighbors aren't clearing their property, but frankly, a lot of the times they just don't have the resources. So our job is to try to find as much resources that we can and get that out into the community, especially those in need. So there's one in pending that we're hoping to get funded over this next year, and we'll continue to look for funding for those programs.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, and we're going to have some more coming from Truckee Fire, too. And so, one, I want to start locally, too. Like, over 70% of our homes in our fire district are in an existing Firewise community. So understanding where these vulnerable populations are, whether it's low income, senior, disabled, and getting the community to meet them where they are is great. The fire district will cover dumpsters, Firewise workday dumpsters, picking up the green waste for free. So there's ways that communities can meet their neighbors where they're at and align their Firewise community workdays, addressing these defensible space complaints and issues, like really at that local grassroots level, which is a cool way to solve it as well, especially when the green waste disposal, the dumpsters, those other outlets can all be requested and provided through Measure T. I think so that's a good way to do it locally. And then over the winter, the fire district is going to be rolling out a little bit more of like a, similar to Craig just said, this access and functional needs. So low income, disabled, senior, defensible space assistance program. it's going to have some limited funding every year, and we want to meet our community members where we can. So it'll probably be the ones that reach out to us, can submit the application so that we can understand their need, and we want to focus it on areas that they have a primary residence here, right? So not necessarily that second, third, fourth home or that undeveloped lot. We want to focus it on that primary residence, and we're actually looking at partnering up with SWEP in the school district. And integrating in education with students and actually some volunteer service learning with students and defensible space assistants. So we can educate our youth, get some good work done at these homes, and actually work education in tandem with this defensible space assistance.
And just to build off the Firewise communities, if you don't know, Nevada County has more Firewise communities than any county or parish in the nation. So it's a very active community and engaged community. And there's a lot of resources from those communities. I hear stories all the time about those communities pitching in volunteerism and equipment and labor, helping, veterans that are in need that can't complete defensible space clearing their elderly neighbor. But it really is a grassroots neighbor to neighbor community that is making a huge impact, and we're lucky to have those communities in the county.
Okay. How's everybody feeling so far? Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. First, I want to take time to recognize our interpreters for the night. They have been busy. Victoria Ferris and Andrea Fernandez, thank you for being here. And before we close it out, I want to turn over to Jen Calloway.
Yeah, just a couple things. Really, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's great to see new faces here. And I just think that speaks to the importance of this issue and how much we value this as a community. And all of the panelists that are here, all of our partner agencies, you've got years of experience and understanding of this community and this region and knowledge in their fields. So thank you for spending your evening with us and missing out on the game if you were interested in that, and on this side too. Really appreciate it. I think you shared a lot of great information, answered a lot of questions. I hope the key takeaways are sign up for Code Red, know your zone, but really have a plan. No situation is like any other. So decide what your plan is, decide what your backup plan is, and leave as early as you can if that's an option. So that's all I wanted to say. And thank you to my staff that's here as well. I know you spent your evening and many days planning this, so appreciate that. And Erica for coordinating all of our translation.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, a round of applause for the crew up here too. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it.